here is a kind of aggro control mirror of sorts, but with one of the decks having access to removal while the other has access to bigger creatures. Obviously, the Bant deck doesn't have things like Searing Spear and Pillar of Flame that Jonathan Job has, but James Scott does have things like Loxodon Smiter that are just way bigger, like way undercosted threats.
And both players have their hands, so we are underway here in these semifinals. We do appreciate you guys joining us this morning. If you do want to interact with us on Twitter, you can join us at SCG Live for your tweets, hashtag SCGKC. AJ and I checking tweets in between rounds, sometimes during
Compulsively.
them. Yeah, sometimes during them, depends on how we feel, but we do want to interact with you guys there at home. As we do see James has begun with 2 Temple Gardens, one of which is going to be untapped, and we may see a Farseek here on turn 2. See if he's going to pull the trigger. I mean, nothing, just an untapped Temple Garden, as you're going to see Jonathan cycle in Azorius Charm.
So this represents the Selesnya Charm 2/2 mode on Jonathan Job's end step, if I had to guess.
Yeah, which he does have 3 copies of in his main deck. You'll see Job play a Glacial Fortress, pass a turn back, and there is Selesnya Charm. The 2/2 Vigilant Knight. It is not a human.
No, it is just a knight. We're not. It could be an elf knight. It could be,
Yeah, we don't know what kind of knight it is,
No,
but
it's
we
just a
know that
knight.
it's not a human knight.
Yeah.
It's got pointy ears in the picture, and it also has Vigilance, as it does come across here, dealing Job 2 points of damage, putting him down to 18. So tie ball game thus far. Gavney Township, and we're probably going to see a Loxodon Smiter.
Jonathan Job staring at Essence Scatter.
Looking a little awkward
Yeah,
there.
a little dismayed, but I mean that's why the Smiter is in the deck. You need to be able to play your threats in a timely fashion, otherwise you just succumb to Sphinx's Revelation. But if you try and just play on curve straight up, you can often just lose to counter magic, Snapcaster counter magic type curves, and Smiter is just the perfect card for such a situation where you need to play a threat, but you also don't want to let your opponent maximize their mana.
And speaking of Snapcaster Mage, you see Jonathan moving one around in his hand. His hand is actually pretty loaded with counter magic right now, but he is going to cast Snapcaster Mage. He's going to target that Azorius Charm, jump in front of that 2/2 Vigilant Knight, and going to try to put this Smiter onto the top of the deck, which does work out. So a pretty good turn there for Jonathan. And if he can untap here, with nothing coming down on the board from James, he's going to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah,
There's a Forest, however.
That was a pretty profitable combat. Anytime that you can Azorius Charm Smiter, it's good because, it basically saves 2 turns because Smiter, one of the few powerful creatures in Standard that doesn't have value when it comes into play or leaves play or has haste or,
Yeah.
there's so many creatures that Azorius Charm actually isn't even that good against, but Smiter's one of the few that it's actually, a full almost removal spell.
As you see Jonathan's hand right now, you see him pull that Essence Scatter to the front. Again, he knows he's not going to be able to counter the Smiter with that, but you also see a Rewind, a couple copies of Counterflux, Aurelia the War Leader, and a Sphinx's Revelation, which he may just have to cantrip here, which is kind of depressing, as you do see a Loxodon Smiter here again from James, and we'll see if he has a land to follow up with. More importantly, we'll see if he has a blue source of mana to follow up with.
Yeah, the Bant deck, even though, it seems like the mana should be pretty solid, it does have a couple colorless lands and a couple of color-intensive cards that it has to cast. Farseek actually playing double duty there as fixing and acceleration.
Here comes your Loxodon Smiter. Job did opt to not cycle that Sphinx's Revelation, just took a draw step, drew a Steam Vent. I guess, AJ, my question for you as we do progress into the mid-game here is, 1, would you have cycled that Sphinx Revelation, and 2, would you have played that Steam Vents untapped?
I can't imagine cycling Sphinx's Revelation would be very profitable there. He only has the 1 copy. Well, now he has 2, but
Yeah,
he only had
the second one.
He only had the 1 copy at the time, and you really need that to fully pull ahead as you transition out of the mid game into the late game. And as for the Steam Vents untapped, I think that if you play it untapped, then you're kind of committing yourself to Revelation for 2, which isn't exactly where you want to be either when you only have the 1 copy. But now that he has 2, he should be happy to Divination on James Scott's end step here.
And that's exactly what's going to end up happening. You saw James try to cast a Farseek. Rewind could not be cast fast enough by Jonathan. He's really going to counter anything at that point as he draws a Sacred Foundry and another Rewind. So, the only thing that he really needs to worry about right now is just this 5/5 locks on Smiter. He needs to get this thing off the table as he draws a Sulfur Falls for the turn. We do know that Jonathan does have a Really of the War Leader in his hand. Not sure if this is an ideal situation to cast it, as the shields will be down for James to actually take advantage, but thus far, James has had the opportunity to cast some of his bigger spells, like a Thragtusk or a Sigarda Host of Herons, and he has not done that, so his hand might be a little bit weak.
Yeah, having Cavern and 5 lands and not playing anything, Jonathan Job's got to be feeling like James likely has spells and things like Prime Speaker that, he can't really take advantage of, maybe the Angel of Serenity, that his hand isn't exactly ideal for this game state, and he might be able to take the turn off to play Aurelia, and as you see, that's what he chooses to do.
Yeah, and so you do see Aurelia the War Leader come into play, attack for 6. Smiter's going to come back for 5, and here comes a Thragtusk. So creatures are piling up on the board here, and Job did take the time to get that Aurelia into play. As you see him draw a Restoration Angel for the turn, Sacred Foundry, the one land in his hand, and we will get life totals updated here for you. Can't imagine. 17 for James. He did gain 5 life off Thragtusk, of course. Job at 6, so facing down what looks to be close to a lethal attack, but he does have plenty of cards in his hand, a Restoration Angel and a Sphinx Revelation, so he's going to be able to stave off elimination. He just needs to decide how he wants to use that Aurelia outside of attacking with it.
Jonathan Job, we see one of the bigger problems with the blue-white-red flash deck. He's got a handful of counter magic, and he's against Smiters and Caverns. That is exactly what James Scott built his deck to do. Blank a bunch of counter magic, and you feel obligated to leave your counter magic up, but you very rarely have anything to counter with it. So not only do you have a bunch of semi-dead cards, but you're also kind of falling behind on tempo.
Now, an interesting thing that Jonathan's done here is he's elected to play that Sacred Foundry tapped, and one of the things that we highlighted yesterday during the broadcast is how this blue-red flash deck really gets its advantage from being able to play 2 spells in one turn. If Job does elect to play that Sacred Foundry untapped and push himself down to 4, he would be able to do something along the lines of Restoration Angel, plus being able to play Counterflux as 2 spells in his hand, or just resolve a Revelation for 4. Instead, he decides to save himself the 2 points of damage, and now it looks like he can really only cast 1 spell this turn.
Yeah, and I think that I think his plan was Restoration Angel and block the Thragtusk. Here, I was going to say double, but is there not a Gavney Township threatening lethal?
There is, and what it looks like to me, AJ, is what he's doing is he's daring James to use it in the face of Azorius Charm.
That is bold.
He is we have the information at home. He does not have Azorius Charm in his hand, and he is daring James to actually use the Gavney Township and go for lethal.
Even if Jonathan had Charm, I'm not sure that it's still, even if he had a Charm face up on the table, I'm still not even sure that it's not correct for James to use Township here. Because not only are you threatening lethal with your Smiter and forcing the Charm, you're also making it so that your Angel doesn't trade with the Thragtusk. Thragtusk just runs over it. But here we go.
Hey, it works out.
The bluff works.
Yeah, he's going to go down to 1. James is going to get a Beast Token. Pretty bold play there by Job.
If our life totals are correct, that was very nice bluff.
Now you're going to see him tap mana. He's going to untap mana now, so he's going to decide what he wants to do. And one thing we do need to check on is we need to know what that Cavern is naming over there for James Scott. Not sure if it is on Beast or not. Angel. It is naming Angel. Okay, so if he does have another Thragtusk, Essence Scatter is actually going to be on. And
that is an Angel.
That is an Angel. And one heck of one in a Sigarda Host of Herons.
And we see, once again, a handful of useless counter magic for John Job.
Job taking a look. He's been holding that Essence Scatter all day, and it has not done anything just yet. Job going to draw a card. As far as things that he can draw into, as you see a Desolate Lighthouse, the first card that does come to top of mind is Supreme Verdict, 2 copies of that in his deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Sphinx's Revelation, but it's not enough to survive. He's actually going to have to Revelation short and hope to hit... Can he Charm? Yeah, he can. No, not with the township active. I don't actually think that there's a sequence that saves Jonathan Job
Well,
here.
he did draw a Desolate Lighthouse for this turn, so the one thing that I think that Job can do is he can play Desolate Lighthouse, activate it, and hope to draw into a Supreme Verdict. I think that's
Yeah,
the best that he can do. He would be on a
he
two-outer
does. I
then.
was gonna say he does have two copies where many flash decks only have one, and as you said, that may be his only option here.
As he has reorganized his lands in such a way that you see the Desolate Lighthouse over there with the necessary lands to activate that and hope that he does draw into one. Now, Jonathan Job has already executed one bluff rather successfully. I don't know what other things he has in his bag of tricks to be able to get himself out of the 11-1 situation, but I'm sure he's willing to try.
Yeah, I I think what put him really behind this game was his misevaluation of the type of game that they were playing in regards to his own Sphinx's Revelation. I think he thought that the game was going to go a lot longer and going to be a lot grindier, and that he needed much more value from the Sphinx's Revelation in order to really bury James, when really all he needed was to use it to stabilize and, preserve his life total, because he's actually trading up, with things like Supreme Verdict and even Azorius Charm, whereas normally in these types of matchups, you're getting Prime Speaker or what have you, and it's actually not very profitable to try and one-for-one them down in Revelation only for 3, say. You really need to get maximum value from all your cards, and then Revelation once you're already spent. But this, the way that normally plays out is what I just described, but that just didn't apply to this game, and I feel like that's where Jonathan Job's disadvantage lied.
And you see immediately you see James untap, draw, and attack with all of his guys. He realizes that Job did not have that Azorius Charm last turn, and he just says, forget this. I'm getting in there with all my guys. I'm going to threaten a township activation, and you're going to have whatever you need to. Searing Spear, Clifftop Retreat, and Sulphur Falls are the cards that are drawn.
I don't know that there's any sequence that saves him there.
Yep. I think his only out in that particular situation is trying to Desolate Lighthouse into a Supreme Verdict.
Yeah.
And hopefully he hits his 2-outer and is able to clear the board, and then the rest of the cards in his hand will take care of the job. But
I think that game came straight down to a misevaluation of his role in the game, the type of game that they were playing, and a misevaluation of the type of Sphinx's Revelation that was required.
sure. We're going to cut back to the booth here. It is trivia time, of course, and
Oh no.
I'll explain the rules, and AJ's going to have to ask the question. We hope he's prepared this time, as he was a little scared yesterday. So I bit the bullet. I'm a good guy. Very easy. We'll ask you guys a trivia question, and you will hashtag your answer on Twitter with SCG Premium. We will select one of the correct answers. Again, it's not about speed. It is about accuracy. And after this match, we will announce the winner who gets the 6 months. But without any further ado, Mr. Soccer.
All right, this is all I got.
Okay.
What deck here in Kansas City is guaranteed a slot in the finals?
Ooh. All right. I don't think that's too tough. I think that's fair game.
What
Maybe-
deck here in Kansas City in our standard open is guaranteed a slot in the finals?
Might have to do with the other batch that we're not covering, maybe. I don't want to give away any big hints, but if you're able to answer that, again, hashtag SCG Premium. We will select one of the winners who has a correct answer, again, about accuracy, not speed. And
We have
give
a
away
big
6 months.
We have a big roulette wheel in the back that we spin and
Yeah, it's like a big show. We just don't show it to you guys. That's
yeah.
all.
No, it's just for us.
We have to entertain ourselves somehow.
We do the South Park, the chicken thing where you let them run around. The guy's got the kazoo.
I don't watch South Park.
Bail out. Bail out.
I don't know.
No.
No, I don't watch South Park.
All right. I'm just.
If you want to talk about chicken jokes, though, Arrested Development's a little bit more my speed.
Is there anyone in this family even seen a chicken? What do you?
That's right.
Is that supposed to be a chicken? I don't. All right, sideboarding.
You guys see Jonathan Job's sideboard on the screen. AJ has it in front of him, and he needs to make things a little bit better. I actually think that game one kind of went the way he wanted to, but I think, as you said, a small misevaluation. He did have a couple of good turns in the early game with the Azorius Charm and the Snapcaster Mage on that, but just wasn't able to really stabilize, and that counter magic looked a little bit poor, so maybe he sideboarded some of that out?
Yeah, I mean, again, that game one, he thought that he was going to be able to one for one more, and then use the Sphinx's Revelation to refuel afterwards. But I mean, with Smiters and Cavern and, casting the Thragtusk, the only really counterable creature the entire game, on the turn that Jonathan Job tapped out, those counters were not going to be one for ones, and his Revelation was actually needed to pull him into the game into a stable board position rather than being the type of Sphinx's Revelation that he waits until after. That being said, post board, he gets another copy of Supreme Verdict and a couple detention spheres. Now, the reason that that's important, besides just helping him stabilize, is it is not only a way to trade up, which is super profitable for the Sphinx's Revelation deck. Normally, the Revelation deck doesn't mind trading down, and by trading up and trading down, I mean giving or receiving card advantage on exchanges. Normally, the Sphinx's Revelation decks are willing to trade down a bit. One for one, maybe two for three themselves sometimes, or three for two themselves sometimes, just to get to the point where they Revelation and then none of that matters. But here, if you can Detention Sphere two things or use Supreme Verdict to wrath the opponent's board of multiple creatures, then you're profiting so much that your Sphinx's Revelations are going to be extraordinary, no matter how much they're cast for. Even two or three is just going to be back-breaking. So yeah, upping on your removal count post board and maybe shaving some of these not so good counter spells, probably where Jonathan Job's going to be.
Taking a look at James' side here, playing against the blue-white-red deck, the first thing you kind of look towards is the counter magic in his side, where you see a negate and dissipate if he wants to fight over things with reactive spells, or if he just wants to be purely proactive in this match. That'll be an interesting thing to see how he does decide to sideboard. But the most important card, and the obvious one that he's going to bring in here, are the two copies of Garruk Primal Hunter, because it just plays both roles very well against the blue-red flash deck of being proactive and being able to create threats and being able to draw himself cards and be able to just keep flooding the boards with cards that are problematic for Jonathan. Other than that, we have seen it earlier when we saw James yesterday against Tyler Lytle playing Esper Control. We thought that maybe Psychic Spirals would come in, but after we saw how the games played out, it didn't really seem like the best of ideas. I think that holds true here as well. And I think that he's just going to want to try to be as proactive as possible. Maybe you'll see the Oblivion Ring come in. Maybe you will see, again, that Counter Magic and Negate and Dissipate come out, because I don't think he's going to want cards like Supreme Verdict in his deck anymore. And I don't think he's going to want Detention Spheres either. So,
yeah, I think that Oblivion Ring is a reasonable option, basically just for Jonathan Job's Detention Spheres. As you said, Garruk is like the premium card in this matchup going into the post-board games, because not only is it a huge threat, but it can draw a ton of cards, and you can actually keep pace with Sphinx's Revelation. As we talked about yesterday, you'll often see this convergence point in games in Standard right now, where on turn 9 or 10, both players will either blast off a giant Sphinx's Revelation, or one person will Revelation, the other person will Garruk, or whatever the card advantage engine is, and then you'll start a new game. Both players around 20 life and around 7 cards in hand, except there's like 8 lands in play for each side.
yeah.
And Garruk is the card to let the Bant deck sort of keep parity with Sphinx's Revelation, the card that's supposed to be pulling the Flash deck ahead. Also, for that exact reason, Dispel and Negate, you can't negate the Supreme Verdict. You can't save your creatures with it. But if you can force your Flash opponent to trade evenly or trade down with you, because your creatures have extra value, and then counter or at least fight over their Sphinx's Revelation, then you can really put a damper on their ability to transition from that mid game where they're trying to stabilize into that late game where they're really favored.
And as we are underway here in Game 2, you see both players just establishing their mana bases right now. No spells being cast. Job's starting to draw a couple lands. His hand is starting to look a little bit land heavy. So he's going to play his Steam Vents and pass the turn back, and we will see James cycle an Azorius Charm here. So start to increase the velocity of his deck a little bit. make sure that he is able to hit some land drops. But no Loxodon Smiter on turn 3 for James. And if you're Jonathan, that's probably a bit of a sigh of relief.
Yeah, absolutely. The Smiter is like one of the biggest threats because it forces action from Jonathan Job. Whether that's a charm, and then you can cast your another creature in the second main phase, or if it's, you know, a Wrath, Supreme Verdict rather, then you get full free reign on your turn to resolve something that Jonathan Job's gonna have to trade down with at a significantly unprofitable rate, such as the Garrick Primal Hunter.
You see Job thumbing his cards in his hand. The thing he's like trying to decide right now, it looks like to me, as if he wants to play Augur of Bolas this turn to represent counter magic. Again, we saw how poor counter magic was for Job in the last game. The Essence Scatter, the counter fluxes never getting out of his hand. But the one thing is, you know, he doesn't want to let that influence the way he wants to sideboard. And the reason for that is because if he does board out of that counter magic, AJ, then Garrick Primal Hunter is free to just come into play and dominate a game.
Yeah, not only the Garrick, but also the namesake card of the deck, the Prime Speaker Zaganya, is a card that is, you know, a little more difficult to cavern out if you're trying to cavern your Thragtusks or your Angels. And obviously it doesn't have an uncounterability clause such as the Smiter. So those two spells are sort of the big ways that the Bant deck can keep parity with the Sphinx's Revelation deck, or pull ahead even in card advantage. And they are also, coincidentally, two of the most counterable spells from James. So Jonathan Job definitely doesn't want to cut all of his counter magic because, you know, specifically for those two cards.
You see Augur of Bolas here for Jonathan, going to reveal a Hallowed Fountain, a Sulphur Falls that go to the bottom, and a Sphinx's Revelation that'll go to hand. But the one thing that we see in his hand here, for everybody at home and us in the booth, is that he is setting up an Angel of Serenity, a one of that's in his sideboard that is in his hand right now, has the mana, it looks like, to cast that the next turn, and if he can walk James into playing a third creature, he can actually clear up the board and have a sizable threat to actually close the game with. So the perfect card here. Jonathan also representing Rewind yet again that he does have in his hand. So, you know, even though he is being beaten down here by a Restoration Angel and a Loxodon Smiter, I think things are looking favorable for Jonathan. But again, we don't have very good information on what's in James's hand, as he is keeping it pretty hidden from everybody but himself.
James playing it close to the chest, you know, doesn't want to reveal any secrets to us, you know. In the booth, we're trying to analyze, and he just wants to play his game, Cedric. Just let him play his game.
He doesn't want anyone to know what's in his hand. He wants it to be a surprise for everybody.
I think that Angel of Serenity, as you said, is going to be a big crux in this game. Not only to, you know, if James doesn't have an answer, then it will outright stabilize and probably kill him. But even if he has the Selesnya Charm, or I guess Selesnya Charm is the answer, then it still like buys a turn and a half, which then Jonathan Job can use to blow off a giant Sphinx's Revelation and then untap and use, you know, Supreme Verdict or whatever, you know, multi-removal spell type of turn he needs to really exchange resources.
And now you will see a Sphinx's Revelation here for James on Jonathan's unstep. This Revelation is going to be for 3. You see in Job's hand, he does have a Rewind and a Dispel right now. So he's figuring out which one of those counter magic spells he wants to use to take care of this, because this is certainly not going to resolve. AJ, if you're in this spot, which one do you select?
It's a little rough because on the one hand, Rewind can counter things like Garrick or Prime Speaker, whereas the Dispel only hits the Sphinx's Revelation. But you want the Dispel because it's so cheap that you can Sphinx's Revelation for all of your mana -1 and protect it with the Dispel. You can't exactly protect your Sphinx's Revelation with a Rewind, otherwise your Revelation is like drawing 1-2 cards.
Yeah.
So he does indeed feel like he's going to be leaning on Sphinx's Revelation pretty heavily this game, really needs to force it through. He's going to leave the Dispel in his hand.
You see James here, before he does attack, he plays a Temple Garden untapped immediately, takes 2 damage, do that, pushing himself down to 18, which is a little bit curious. We didn't know for 7 mana in his deck he does have access to 2 copies of Angel of Serenity, but you're going to see Jonathan here play Restoration Angel before blocks. He's going to blink his Augur of Bolas. He's going to show you a Desolate Lighthouse and Aurelia the War Leader and a Snapcaster Mage. Those are going to go to the bottom of his deck, Aurelia probably being the most important of those 3 cards. And now he's going to decide how he wants to block here, sitting at 10 life. He wants to use his life total as a resource as best he can. He's going to double block the Loxodon Smiter. It's going to take care of the Restoration Angel, it looks like. and he's going to take 3. So a trade in combat there. The Smiter is going to go bye-bye, as Jonathan does point to that, and we'll see if James does have something like an Aurelia here.
Well,
An Angel of Serenity.
That was a fairly profitable combat for Jonathan Job. Even though his auger missed, he drew a theoretical some percentage of a card, and was able to trade down for or trade up for the Smiter rather. There was no Selesnya Charm or Azorius Charm to blow him out in combat, but the card of the hour, the card of the matchup, Garruk Primal Hunter.
And this is the card that, if you were Job and you looked at James's sideboard in between games, this is the card that you were scared of. Only 2 copies in his deck. But I think the other thing that's kind of important here as well for James is that the reason he may have played that Temple Guard in the tap is we talked about the negate in his sideboard, and he is representing that right now.
Yep, the exact mana to cast the Primal Hunter and the negate, taking 2. I mean, if he doesn't have it, he's pretending he does.
Yeah.
And not only does that protect the Garruk, which Jonathan Job didn't have a counter, so he doesn't have to use it for that purpose, but it also means that Jonathan Job is going to be able to use his Dispel to protect or he is going to need to use his Dispel to protect his Sphinx's Revelation a couple turns down the line.
You see Job is finally going to pull the trigger here on the Angel of Serenity. It's going to clear up
Can't negate
some
that.
things. That is one thing that you
Can't
cannot
negate
negate. As you see, Augur Volus is going to knock a Garruk down to 3. Angel is on the table now, and you see Jonathan does have the Dispel at the ready. We'll see if James has Angel of Serenity of his own, and he does.
Can't dispel that.
You cannot dispel that. So, we're going to see some things get switched around here.
We're playing some musical angels.
And it's very funny to me that, if we looked at the metagame a month and a half ago, if you were casting Angel Serenity, you were probably being made fun of.
Yeah.
And now if you're not casting Angel Serenity, you're probably being
You
made
deserve
fun
to be
of.
made fun.
Yeah. Because people seem to have forgotten just how powerful of a card this is. It is starting to really get its stranglehold on Standard yet again via Junk Reanimator. And we also see people playing, some copies in a Prime Speaker Bant deck. Jonathan has one in the sideboard of his Blood Red Flash deck. And, there was a card that did have the ability to take over this game state, but
We talk about
not in the end.
We talk about how Haymaker heavy the format is, and Angel Serenity is sort of the Haymaker to end all Haymakers. It's right now it's sort of the top end, along with things like Gristlebrand,
Yeah.
where I don't want to say the ultimate Haymaker, but it's sort of the trump. It's one of the few cards that can really profitably exchange with just about everything in the format.
You see Job kind of thumbing through his hand right now. That Restoration Angel is back in his hand now. He has a Dispel. He has 2 copies of Sphinx's Revelation. Really trying to figure out how he wants to go about doing this. And actually, there's 2 copies of Restoration Angels there.
2 pair, Angels and Revelations.
Yeah, Angels and Revelations, powerful magic cards in his hand. Can he get them out of his hand in time is the question. And I think the important thing here for Job is he really needs to resolve a big revelation, and he's elected not to cast one right away, so he's opening back up James's counter magic, and James says, I'm going to Garruk immediately to draw 5 cards. Are you going to stop me?
This is the exact type of game state that I was talking about earlier with a big convergence point. Jonathan Job's life total is significantly lower than he would have liked, but it is the sort of Garruk draws a ton of cards, Sphinx's Revelation draws a ton of cards. Where does that leave us?
I think that leaves Garruk to be the champion.
Yeah. With Jonathan Job at such a low life total, I actually think that I would have tried to pull the trigger on that Sphinx's Revelation when it was a little safer.
Yeah, I feel like a main phase Revelation there. Get your information, put the shields down, let James kind of do his worst, and then see if what you drew into is going to be able to stop him.
Well, as you said, do your worst. I mean, there's a Garruk and Angel already resolved.
Yeah.
How much worse could it really get,
Yeah.
Jonathan Job really just needed the cards and actually really needed the life. And he's actually going to choose to use Restoration Angel, try and get a little more value out of his Augur. Maybe he's going to run Double Angel here and try and run some tricky blocks. Detention Sphere and a Think Twice going on the bottom, a Think Twice going into hand. Yeah, maybe this is his strategy because he's going to try and knock off the Garruk while he can.
I mean, one of the things here too, AJ, is that one of the cards, that I was thinking that is super important in his sideboard is Attention Sphere, which of course he's going to bring in this matchup. You're going to see Restoration Angel here, going to blink another one of those.
Hit a
He's going to find
verdict.
a Supreme Verdict. I think the Attention Sphere was one of the reasons that I actually wanted to revelate on the main phase, is just to try to hope to hit, a Detention Sphere so I can take care of that Garrick, because that's the biggest problem right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're at the point where the Garrick has done its damage. It's put a beast into play and it's drawn 5 cards, and Jonathan Job is still going to have to invest something in order to kill it. As Jonathan Job, you have to sort of see that as a sunk cost. The game state is now what it is, and in order to break even, you're going to have to Sphinx's Revelation to sort of catch up to the value that Garrick's given, or at least try to. And then after that, you're still going to have to use another Sphinx's Revelation and or that Angel of Serenity that he just got back from that double block in order to then try and pull ahead of the tremendous value that Garrick's given James this game.
Now, there were a lot of things that could go wrong on that attack, on that block by Jonathan, double blocking that Angel of Serenity, be it 4 copies of Azorius Charm or 3 copies of Selesnya Charm in James's deck. But I think Job realized that, I don't know if I can beat those cards anyway, so I just kind of have to go for it with this double block, and Angel of Serenity actually ends up dying. James gets some cards back in his hand, the Restoration, I think it's the Loxodon Spider he gets back, but most importantly is Job gets his Angel of Serenity back to work with now.
Yeah, which is definitely one of the more helpful cards that he could have here to help stabilize and pull ahead. Ooh, and he drew a Detention Sphere, and this Angel is likely going to kill Garrick. James Scott, he drew so many cards, but it looked like he discarded 2 Supreme Verdicts, which we actually thought he was going to sideboard out. Obviously not too great here in this matchup, but actually might have been okay against the Angel of Serenity that Jonathan Job is threatening.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised with the verdicts we're in to begin with, but the thing that really does surprise me is him just moving to a discard step and not actually playing anything.
Yeah.
You see all that mana on the table. You see 9 mana untapped, has all access to all the colors. You don't see him play a spell. It makes you wonder what he drew with that Garrick Primal Hunter with a draw 5. It must not have been very good.
I have to assume there's a Restoration Angel to block and try and save Garrick, would be my guess. But again, do you want to just cast a Verdict there? I mean, you have so much mana. You can theoretically protect Garrick, prevent... I mean, at least make Jonathan Job invest a removal spell, a burn spell, to finish off the Garrick or a Detention Sphere,
Now, one thing you see Jonathan doing right now is he's tapping 3 mana in his first main phase, and it looks like he's going to pull the trigger on this Detention Sphere right away to try to take care of this Garrick Primal Hunter. My question for you is, don't you want to lead with an attacker and Restoration Angel and see how things go first before pulling the trigger on the Detention Sphere?
Absolutely. I think that Jonathan Job is maybe going to try and leave his Angel back, is the reasoning behind this. But I'm not sure that that's better than, as you said, attacking the Garrick and then hoping to resolve a Revelation. Obviously, well, we were wondering what was in James Scott's hand, and the answer is a bunch of Angels.
Yeah, just a few.
So now John is going to have to Revelation to hope to survive to get to Verdict the next turn. I don't know. This is actually a really tough spot. As I said, his life total being that low is absolutely crucial, because when you enter that sort of convergence point where both players are going to draw a ton of cards, you actually need to have a high enough life total to sort of play with, continue to survive while you exchange cards.
And it's interesting, too, that he chose to cast the Detention Sphere, because let's say, for example, he does attack the Restoration Angel into the Garrick, and James decides, all right, I'm going to play my own Restoration Angel, I'm going to block. Or James decides, I'm going to play both my Restoration Angels, and I'm going to go block. Well, then he's able to pull the trigger on the Supreme Verdict. Now, of course, he knew about the Supreme Verdict from the Augur Bolus, but, maybe he forgot, or maybe he misevaluates on what he's trying to accomplish. Now, instead, we're looking at Supreme Verdict that doesn't look like it's going to be cast, and we can see Jonathan's hand. He doesn't really have very much going on, and we know that James has the Detention Sphere in his hand, and is probably going to cast that to take care of the Restoration Angel.
Well, that would kill his own Angels, so that would not be the best play.
That would be the worst play,
yeah.
Actually, of the decisions. That would be the worst one.
So here's the Desperation Revelation, and James
We thought he had negate.
Yeah, James definitely signaled negate way earlier, and when he tapped 2 there, I thought that was going to be the game, but it looks like he was just cycling charm, and Revelation's actually going to resolve, so James running a little bluff maybe earlier in the game. But Jonathan Job is going to go up to 7 and potentially block to only take 6, going to theoretical 1. A Selesnya charm is lethal here, but James still doesn't have one. Might have boarded him out.
Yeah, and that was the reason, as I misstepped on talking about detentions for taking care of the Angels. That was the reason I think that we kind of wanted to board in the Oblivion Ring,
yes,
so you don't have the detention sphere hiccups.
Exactly, but James using his turn off quite well with a Giant Sphinx's Revelation. He's going to draw 4, was that? And but his shields are down, so now Jonathan Job is likely going to play his own Revelation. Actually, he has the Supreme Verdict.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
He can verdict. Right now, I mean, as we're trading haymakers back and forth, that Revelation looks to be for 5 right now, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're trading haymakers back and forth here, both players are just going to keep putting their shields down, it looks like. He can Supreme Verdict, or he can
Revelation.
He can cast that Angel Serenity.
Yeah, Angel
to take care
also.
of those as well. And you see James is picking up his Restoration Angels, ready to put him in the bin. And it looks like that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, the Restoration Angel attack usually signifies that it's either getting Wrathed or Angel Serenity.
And you see Job there with 5 lands up, and we know that he has a Rewind in his hand. You also see a copy of Think Twice as well, so you can think twice and flash it back. As James quickly draws, plays a Glacial Fortress, and is going to figure out what he wants to do this turn. You see a hand with at least 2 Loxodon on Smiters and an Attention Sphere over there, so we'll see how he wants to sequence this turn out. But as we do see James play his cards this turn, a quick update for you guys. Will Craddock in the Junk Reanimator Mirror does win and defeats Jacob Bao 2-0. So Craddock is going to look to redeem himself from his finals loss in Dallas earlier this year and take down a Standard Open.
I would say that he redeemed himself by winning the Legacy Open.
See, that's what you would say, but I think he wants to be a Standard champion as well.
I believe that the trophy count can never be too high.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
We're going to see a Loxodon Smiter here. We see Job cast a Think Twice, and it looks like that's the only spell that James Scott is going to like to cast. So you see Think Twice be flashed back. It looks like Job drew an Assemble the Legion, a card that we have talked about quite a bit this weekend. It's really starting to make its presence known in this Standard format.
Another card that James would like to Oblivion Ring or negate, use his sideboard cards on. So Jonathan Job, for a long time, he had 2 Sphinx Revelations, right? And he can use one as sort of bait/stabilization and his other one to really pull ahead. But that double Restoration Angel turn was very threatening. Jonathan Job had to use a Revelation for only 2 to survive. So now he only has 1 Revelation, and he's trying to figure out, how can I get this game state to a point where I don't have to use my Sphinx Revelation to stabilize, but rather stabilize with just the cards that I have and use the Sphinx Revelation to bury my opponent. And he's going to have to use his powerful control cards, such as Assemble the Legion and Angel Serenity, to try and get to a point where his Revelation is not a desperation, man, I hope that I can survive Revelation, but rather on, okay, now, we're even, and I'm just going to win from here.
You see Jonathan going through his hand, deciding what he wants to do here. Again, he does have a ton of options with the Angel Serenity, the Restoration Angel, the Sphinx's Revelation, and you're going to see James cast a Restoration Angel here. And it looks like we're going to see Jonathan pull the trigger on the Rewind that is in his hand. And there you do see a Rewind. So that will take care of that Restoration Angel. James is going to untap. He's going to draw. And he looks like he's going to come across. This is a lethal attack. We know that Jonathan does have a few tricks up his sleeve. Wondering how much this Revelation is going to be for, because as you said earlier, he can Revelate for 1 less and leave that Dispel up.
Yeah, he does have Dispel and Negate, so it is possible that he wanted to leave up both. But here, the Sphinx's Revelation for 2 to survive resolved, so you gotta feel pretty confident that James doesn't have a counterspell here. You still want to, he could have drawn one, so you still want to leave up one for the Dispel, but you don't have to leave up 3 for Dispel and Negate.
Yeah.
I actually would have considered leaving up 2 there, because I don't think the 1 card, 5 versus 6 cards is going to matter that much, but Negate, while protecting your Sphinx's Revelation, also can counter Garrick if James uses that as his follow-up.
And that's certainly the most scary follow-up that I think James can have. And you see him tapping a lot of mana. There's a Prime Speaker Zagana. That cannot be negated or dispelled, so you're going to see James draw 5 cards, I believe.
How many cards are these players drawing? It's every turn I feel like they're drawing entirely new hands.
Yeah. Except for James is at 18 and Jonathan's at 3.
Yeah.
And now you're going to see James cast a Thragtusk. Okay. So Thragtusk is going to push James up to 23.
And this is the game state that Jonathan Job was actually kind of playing towards. Even though James just drew a million billion cards, Jonathan Job has a full grip. His Revelation resolves, and he now gets to play something like Verdict Assemble, which is a pretty good sequence, or Angel of Serenity, also quite powerful. Yeah, it's all about exchanging cards after the Revelation, and wow, look at that hand. It's like 15 cards.
Yeah, they both have a million cards in their hand. As you're going to see Supreme Verdict take out the 3 creatures. Beast Token is going to be left behind. Job sitting at 3 life, which is one of the poor numbers that he can sit at right now.
Facing down exactly 3 damage.
Yes.
Little uncomfortable position.
And, one of the things that is, you see Job looks like he's going to decide what he wants to discard right now, and he's going to be thumbing towards what I feel is probably one of those Assemble Legions, but maybe a Dispel. But as I said earlier, we talked about Assemble Legion quite a bit yesterday, and your ability to convert, as you put it, the cards that you were drawing into actually being able to win the game. And you see where Job would really like to be able to establish Assemble the Legion, but he is just, the water is rising too quickly. He's never has the time or the window to actually just tap 5 mana, play that card, and actually start to get it online, because it would turn the tide, but it actually doesn't affect the game right away.
Yeah, not only do you have to tap 5 at sorcery speed and pass, but then you also have to wait at least a turn, probably 2 or 3, before Assemble Legion really helps you stabilize, and then after that, it turns around and helps you win the game. That Jonathan Job just doesn't have nearly, even close to that amount of time, facing lethal attacks turn after turn after turn, always having to keep his head just above water.
So there's a Restoration Angel that's looking to block this Beast Token.
It is going to work.
All right, Beast Token
There
down.
we go.
So let's see what James has drawn from, he ended the last turn, he had a discard. So he's going to begin by tapping some number of mana. You see him reaching for 5, decides not to. We're going to see a Loxodon Smiter. And one card that we know that James has had in his hand for a little while here, AJ, is a Detention Sphere too.
Yeah, hasn't really had a good opportunity to use it. Not actually that many good targets from Jonathan Job, but it is quite good against Assemble the Legion. Exactly Assemble the Legion, which happens to be what Jonathan Job has. Essence Scatter.
Can't.
Yeah. And Jonathan Job kind of counting James's threats, trying to figure out his hand through deductive reasoning of what he's used so far, what he can beat, what he needs to play around, etc. Looks like he's just going to play the Assemble the Legion here, try and maybe chump with his Restoration Angel and use his counter magic. I mean, now he's got Negate, Scatter, Dispel, so I think this is the point where he's trying to get that Assemble the Legion online.
And he finally has had the opportunity to cast it. You see James tapping mana. There's a Sigarda Host of Herons. Essence Scatter. Counter Magic finally doing something. If anything, Jonathan's got to be going, finally.
Yeah,
and there's
for sure.
Detention Sphere looking to target Assemble Legion. Negate says no, sir. So finally, Jonathan able to actually cast some of this counter magic.
Trading resources. He's able to use his one-for-ones.
Yes, finally.
That's all he's wanted all game is to be able to use his one-for-ones. And not only is he doing that, but he's doing that while Assemble the Legion is in play, which is exactly what you want to do. Get your Assemble the Legion in play, and then trade one-for-one. You know why, Cedric?
Why?
I don't know. Oh, it's because Assemble the Legion is in play.
Oh.
So you're profiting every single turn, and you're fine trading cards when, you basically have the equivalent of, a Bitter Blossom, a Phyrexian Arena type card where you're gaining an advantage every single turn.
Let's call Assemble the Legion what it is. It's mobilization.
It's Sacred Mesa.
It's the best token maker of all time, mobilization.
It's Kil'jaeden Outpost.
So we're going to put a token on.
Not too significant, but
couldn't block fast enough with the Assemble Legion token.
Free chump.
3. Assemble Legion is looking to take over, and it looks like James, we're not sure what's in his hand right now, but anything that's really threatening, the one thing that Jonathan's looking to dodge here is Restoration Angel, or he was looking to dodge. You see Thragtusk now, and James kind of cast that with a bit of a meh.
Yeah, he knows that this game has really slipped out of his reach.
You feel the shift now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the last revelation was the big pull ahead. That's the game state that Jonathan Job has been hoping to get to, and now that we've reached that point, James' body language tells the whole story. He knows that the game was slipping out of reach, and this Sphinx's revelation is all but the nail in the coffin. James is going to have quite an impressive sequence to even keep up and survive, let alone finish Job off.
You see a revelation for 7 from Job now, so he's going to gain 7 life, go up to 10. That 3 life was a precarious life total, but he has got himself out of this, and now you're finally going to see the one thing that we wanted to see, Assemble the Legion finally start to take over this game.
For how many times we've talked about it, and how many times we've seen it on deck lists, I think this is the first time all weekend we've seen it get to a point where it's profitable.
Yeah, and it can finally turn a game. And this is now the water rising on James. It's a slow rise.
Yes.
It's a very slow rise of water, but eventually it will be something that he cannot overcome unless he's able to remove it with an Attention Sphere or an Oblivion Ring.
But that window is passed. Jonathan Job has, a bunch of Snapcasters, a bunch of counter magic. He's just got access to everything he could ever need. He's all but closed the door on James this game. All he needs to do is finish him off. Yeah. Get him from 28 to 0.
And the one question you kind of wonder at home, and the one question I'm wondering here is just maybe how many cards does Jonathan have left in his library, just to make sure that he's obviously balancing everything out pretty well here as far as what he wants to discard and how he wants to go over, the game to be able to actually end it and get Assemble the Legion online. He's done a nice job of balancing everything out, make sure at one point Jonathan was at 1.
Yes.
This game. So he's done a nice job using his life total as a resource and everything. One of the ways that he can actually kind of lose this game is just the number of cards that he does have left in his library. I feel like it's not that low.
No. And as you were saying yesterday, Aurelia, the war leader, closes games quite quickly.
Yeah.
You only need, a couple of attackers to really make Aurelia just an instant 2-turn clock out of nowhere. Jonathan Job here, as you said, was facing, he faced like maybe 8 or 9 potentially lethal attacks this game and was able to stave them all. Look, he's counting his library right now. Yeah, he's got about 25-ish there, 20, 25. More than enough time with, the angel combo of Serenity and Aurelia.
The magic number for Job's deck is 18, so 18 is plenty high enough that he doesn't have anything to be worried about. You see James is going to cast a Farseek here, and I've seen some white flags be waved.
Yeah.
But when casting a Farseek on turn 800 is a pretty good sign that I don't have very much action left in my hand.
Yep, it's one of those type of situations, like as a player in a tournament, it doesn't feel good because you know that you just can't win, but like you have to keep playing. You know?
I mean, gotta cast your Farseek.
Because I mean, you're like 0.00001%. You never know. Your opponent can make some huge blunder. He could have drawn literally all of his lands, and you peel the perfect sequence. You know that it's so unlikely for you to win, but you can't just concede. I mean, you're not under any time constraints in the top four. There's a lot on the line. You have to play it out.
Yeah, you can certainly gain some information.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
how Jonathan plays the next game, or
How he plays the end game. It's very significant. And
maybe how he sideboarded. You can always gain information, so there's real no reason to concede, especially when you're on untimed rounds here.
for sure.
Now, we'll see. I don't think that James is going to be able to come back this game, as Job does have, again, a pretty stable life total. He's starting to build an advantage that James can't come back with the Seventh Legion, slowly but surely.
He's rallying the troops.
Yes, that's certainly what he's doing.
He's doing his best Paul Revere impression here. He's a little slower, it takes a little more time, but he is indeed creating an army that will likely end up finishing James off in his own sweet time.
Now you see an Assemble the Legion. The soldiers are going to attack, and then Job does cast Supreme Verdict to reset things. You'll see a Gathering Township activation, make that beast a little bit bigger, and we'll see what Job wants to do to take care of that. We know he has a Snapcaster Mage in his hand. Likely to have an Azorius Charm in the bin, or if he's just content taking 4 points of damage, which it looks like he is. Again, using his life total as a resource.
Yeah. Definitely not all that threatening. A little confusion going on there, but some of the Legion ticking up to 4, making some peoples.
So there's your 4 red-white soldier tokens that do have haste. Job going to draw a Clifftop Retreat.
And, yep, just all counter magic and removal and win conditions for Jonathan Job.
Yeah, now he can start making this attack. And this is the attack I assumed he was going to start making, which is attack with all but one.
The
chump with the other one.
Yep.
And if anything goes wrong, he's got counter magic. He's got an Angel of Serenity in his hand as well. And if he really wants to close the door on this game, he can tap his mana on his turn to play Aurelia the War Leader and really just start to put a crushing blow on.
Yep.
So the game is not over in terms of life points, that sort of thing, as you're going to see James cycle an Azorius Charm, but this is an insurmountable advantage, and this is where the blue red flash deck wants to be, but it's difficult for it to get there against this Prime Speaker Bant deck.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why Magic is confusing for some, because a couple turns ago, both players had a ton of lands, a ton of cards in hand. Jonathan Job was at a significantly lower life total, and James's board looked much more impressive, and all we could say was, well, Jonathan Job's got him right where he wants him.
Yeah.
James is really looking for some help here. But that is how this matchup plays out. That is how this deck plays out, and it looks like Jonathan Job's considering the Aurelia. The time may be upon us to actually close it out, make it a two-turn clock, and move us on to a game 3 here.
Now, this is actually a lethal attack here by Job, as he does have 8 tokens in play, plus Aurelia. So the first attack will be for 11, and the second attack will be for 11. And by my math, and I'm no scientist like yourself.
Hold on, I have a calculator app on my phone. Pull it out.
That's 22?
If we could get, our director to maybe run some numbers for us, 11 and 11, how does that add up?
And he's typing frantically on a computer. It is 22. Essence Scatter will take care of the Restoration Angel, and Jonathan Job wins quite a nail biter of a game 2. And that feels like that should be a game 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not only facing a bunch of lethal attacks and barely staving them off, but he was staving them off by tapping out. He had to use all of his mana and a bunch of his cards to stabilize, where if James had basically anything on some of those turns, Jonathan could have just gone to 0 life, despite a handful of counter magic and Sphinx's Revelations, because he wasn't able to convert them at a reasonable clip, where James got ahead early. His Garrick he got under Jonathan Job's Sphinx's Revelations and was able to quote Revelation before the Revelation deck, using his Garrick to draw 5. And at any point there, like an Azorius Charm was lethal for a lot of those turns, a Selesnya Charm was lethal for almost all those turns, and counter magic, any piece of counter magic was lethal for a bunch of those turns. And James just didn't have any of it. He had a bunch of kind of do-nothing creatures and, I guess, lands.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you can take away from that game, actually there's 2 things. Number 1, you see very clearly the difference between the Tension Sphere and Oblivion Ring in that game.
Yes.
The Tension Sphere taking care of the Garrick Primal Hunter, We saw that James was holding on to a detention sphere of his own for a very long time. Had one of those copies of the detention sphere been an Oblivion Ring, I think that game is wildly different.
Well, yeah, because of Jonathan Job's sort of conservative play of rather than attacking, trying to kill the Garrick with the Restoration Angel, he chooses to Detention Sphere it. While that does, help him survive against some sequences that James was representing, it also does turn on the Oblivion Ring, your Detention Sphere, get back Garrick. You can't Detention Sphere, but the Oblivion Ring does get back the Garrick, which, as we've said multiple times, is the biggest threat to Jonathan Job's overall game plan.
But one of the other things that did happen, the second point I do want to highlight in that game, is that when we saw, both players starting to draw a lot of cards there on James's side, he did eventually run out of action. But one of the things that kind of contributed to that is when you have bad cards to draw in your deck, you can, it's a makeshift way to run out of action. We saw him draw 2 Supreme Verdicts.
And the Detention Sphere, aforementioned Detention Sphere, a bunch of theoretical spells that are basically bricks.
Yeah.
And, as I was saying, we don't know what he had. A bunch of lands and a bunch of do-nothing creatures. And Supreme Verdicts and Detention Sphere. When you have those semi-dead cards, you could draw 15 cards, and it's not going to matter if none of them impact the game state and try and prevent Job from doing his thing.
It's all about rule assessment in this particular matchup, and James needs to understand, and hopefully he'll realize this for game number 3, the final game of this match, is that his Supreme Verdicts, that he has access to in his deck, that's not really where he wants to be in this matchup.
No,
it's super important for Jonathan to be casting Supreme Verdict, not for James.
Right.
If James gets in the situation where he needs to actually cast a Supreme Verdict, Jonathan is literally pumping the fist, going, you have to kill my creatures?
Yeah.
Awesome.
My creatures are awful.
Yeah.
God, you have to wrath.
Yeah.
I mean, I said it as soon as we were given the deck lists. It's sort of an aggro control mirror where one player has removal in the form of, the Searing Spears and whatnot, and the other player has way better creatures in the form of Blocks on Smiter and whatnot. And when you have the better creatures, Wrath of God variance is not where you want to be.
Yeah.
I believe that James is certainly the beatdown here and needs to sideboard as such and play as such if he wants to take this game 3 and move on to the finals.
Now, one card that is easy to predict that James did sideboard out is Selesnya Charm, and one thing that would have played a huge role in that game is actually Selesnya Charm. We saw a lot of different combats with Jonathan, had very low life totals, multiple turns where he was at 1, where he's attacking the Restoration Angels and Angels, he's attacking Beast Tokens and Restoration Angels, and if there was just one turn where he could actually have a Selesnya Charm to give that +2/+2 and trample.
Yeah,
it's a lethal attack.
A bunch of them would have been outright lethal, and a bunch of them would have been profitable enough that it was likely he would have won. And just like an instant speed threat, even if it's not that great of a threat, lets you double up, and it's a cheap card. It lets you do 2 things in a turn. I actually think Selesnya Charm's pretty good.
I think it's pretty good in this matchup too. Not even just to represent the fact that it would have been a game-ending effect. You don't want to look at it that narrowly, but I think that's something that's so important in this matchup is just Restoration Angels are going to run into each other.
Yeah.
And being able to win the Restoration Angel War without Gavney Township, which he just has in his deck two copies of, but being able to win it with Selesnya Charm and being able to get an extra point of damage through, trample, all that good stuff, I think that's important in this matchup.
It is, and think of the combats that we saw. We saw 3/3s and 3/4s running into 3/4s. We saw Smiters, a 4/4 running into a double block of Augur Restoration Angel, and all that did was Smiter traded down for Restoration Angel, whereas a Selesnya Charm just 2-for-1s in there.
Yeah,
kills both the
blows up
creature.
combat.
Yeah, kills both of Jonathan Job's creatures and leaves the Smiter around. It would have been a huge trick on a lot of those turns where Jonathan Job was such on his heels, on the back foot, that he needed to tap out and couldn't leave up, say, an Azorius Charm or a Dispel to prevent the Selesnya Charm from James being a big blowout. I don't think that it's the best card ever, but I definitely think it's better than some of the cards that we saw him, discarding due to hand size, such as the Supreme Verdicts and Detention Sphere.
And lastly, before we do begin this final game 3, one of the other modes in Celestia Charm, and it's minor in this matchup, of course, but we do know that Jonathan does have one copy of Angel Serenity in his deck, and being able to exile that, as we saw a little bit of Angel Serenity wars taking place there. If James was able to exile that Angel Serenity, that war would have never taken place.
Yeah.
And we know that Jonathan just ended up having his Angel Serenity in his hand forever for the end of the game, just in case, like, kind of like a a safety net in case something just went horribly wrong. It's like, oh, okay, all 3 of your guys, and have a 5/6 in place. So it's the ultimate safety net as well, and Celestia Charm does a nice job of taking care of that. But we are underway here in Game 3 between James Scott and his Prime Speaker Bantac versus Jonathan Job and Blue, White, Red Flash. Both players kept their 7 and are establishing their mana bases. Dig in, folks, because this is probably going to be another long one.
Yep. Cyclone Azorius Charm, versus playing a 2/2 there. Celestia Charm, a card that I'm definitely going to be sort of looking to see how it would impact the game if it were available, if James had access to it.
So you see, Job did dodge a turn 3 Loxodon Smiter yet again, so this is, exactly where Jonathan wants to be. He's not under pressure right away, so...
He's got his land drops, he's got removal. All he needs is to continue to buy time and use a Sphinx's Revelation, and that's exactly how, this deck is supposed to work.
So here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane in Restoration Angel, and you see that James did play a Gavany Township as well, so, Restoration Angels running into each other.
Not going to happen this game.
Something that's not going to happen this game, that's right.
Gavany Township, one of the pretty interesting cards from James' deck, because it allows him to not overload on threats on the board, but he still gets to use his mana, sort of forcing Jonathan Job's hand, forcing him to use Supreme Verdicts on what otherwise would be pretty insignificant threats, allowing James to utilize his actual threats properly.
And you do see Job here just play a Hallowed Fountain and say go. He was considering playing a Restoration Angel on the end step and decided not to. So here comes Restoration Angel. Azorius Charm is going to put that back upstairs. As you see James thumbing through his hand, you see a negate in his hand, but he is going to let this resolve, and we'll see if he has a Thragtusk or some sort of awesome follow-up here.
Yeah, Restoration Angel, I would say one of the more Azorius Charmable creatures, but it's still, you're still fine drawing it, passing the turn, playing on an end step. It's unwrathable. It lets you double up on threats. It's fairly significant ability in this matchup, facing down counter magic. Speaking of which, we do see a rewind in Jonathan Job's hand, which is the perfect answer to an opponent being able to double up on threats, and that's exactly what we're going to see.
So rewind's going to take care of that, and you see an Essence Scatter in Jonathan's hand as well. James is going to draw his Restoration Angel and likely just going to pass the turn back. So, Jonathan was having problems getting counter magic actually be useful, as we see James playing a Breeding Pool untapped here, but it looks like it's actually going to be fairly good now. And the reason you see James play that Breeding Pool untapped is because he does have the turn of Restoration Angel plus Negate, it looks like.
Yeah, that is certainly what he was representing. Last game he took a similar line, taking 2 damage down to 18, because his life total doesn't matter nearly as much as Jonathan Job's, to represent a negate that he ended up not having.
Yep.
And this time he's doing the same exact play. It's as if last game was a setup for this one, because he did the same exact play, and Jonathan Jobs knows that last time he didn't have the negate, but this time he does.
Yeah. And so you saw James cast a Restoration Angel. Job Essence Scattered it. James decided not to negate, slams down Sigarda. Job plays another Essence Scatter, so the counter magic is being backbreaking this game, and if James had fought maybe with the negate over the Restoration Angel, we might have a Sigarda in play, but instead we see Job just cycling Azorius Charm, and he is sitting pretty right now. As long as he's able to hit land drops and start getting to Revelation land, we might be seeing Job advance to the finals here. James has no pressure on the board, and he's just drawn a Farseek, so a card that is fairly irrelevant at this point in time.
Yeah, Jonathan Job really is setting this game up nicely. The counter magic allowed him to 1-for-1 at a reasonable pace while not under any pressure. He's made most of his land drops. I think he missed 1 and he's about to miss another, but he's got 6 lands in play. He doesn't have a Revelation in hand, nor a way to force it through really, but he's got all the time in the world, a couple more 1-for-1s available to him, and Yeah, I mean, he's drawn it up nicely.
Now, my question for you, as someone who does play Blue White Red Flash a little bit, is he is really holding on to these Restoration Angels for a very long time, where I feel like, he could kind of turn the tide here and be more of the aggressor. He has 2 Restoration Angels in his hand, and, it feels like that he's kind of holding those, waiting for a Snapcaster, or excuse me, an Augur of Bolas to get, like, max value with those, where I think he could just really accelerate this game because, it feels to me that James really doesn't have very much.
Yeah, that is certainly true. I think that there are 2 things at play there. One is the Snapcaster Mage in Jonathan Job's hand represents a lot of value for the Snapcaster Mages, or for the Restoration Angels, as, you can Snapcaster Rewind or what have you, and then later go Restoration Angel, or blink the Snapcaster, Essence Scatter. The mana works out perfectly for that. And the other thing that kind of is significant is the Supreme Verdict in Jonathan Job's hand. He probably wants to exchange that profitably before unleashing the Angel Assault.
Sure. So we're going to see Loxodon on Smiter come on in, and you're going to see a Gavin Township activation. So that guy is a 5/5.
James Scott kind of saying that he doesn't really have much here by dissipating the detention sphere to protect his Smiter. That to me strongly smells of weakness, of lack of threats.
Yeah.
To use such a powerful effect as Dissipate against the Sphinx's Revelation deck is well poised to resolve a big Revelation. To use it just to protect an elephant.
Yep. You see Job is going to pull the trigger on the Supreme Verdict. He's just going to trade 1 for 1. He's going to play Sacred Foundry. He's going to pass the turn. He is representing Counterflux right now. He has an Angel of Serenity in his hand as well, and a couple copies of Restoration Angel. And you see James is just drawing a couple of lands here. Plays a Breeding Pool into play untapped, and it looks like he's just going to pass the turn back.
James quite flooded this game. Jonathan Job, well poised for Revelation, but actually so well poised for it that he doesn't even need it.
Yeah.
He's been able to I wouldn't say profitably exchange, but exchange at a break-even way. Wow, that was a huge sequence.
Yeah. As you see, James did cast a Sphinx's Revelation that was going to be 4/5 to try to get him back into this game with Negate backup, but Counterflux says, I don't care about Negate backup, and here is Augur of Bolas, and this is what Jonathan's been waiting for.
Now those
Looking for
restos.
one of those. These restos have gone from, to a very good magic card to a great one now.
Yes.
He's going to take Supreme Verdict off of this first Augur of Bolas, and now you're going to start seeing him cast those, and we are going to turn the corner here.
Unleash the Angels. Release the Angels, Cedric. The next couple of turns, I feel, are going to be quite heavenly.
Hollow Fountain untapped. You were wrong. No Angel. No heaven.
Not this
here.
turn. Not this turn. He's got a Snapcaster still in hand. He's got to represent a Lighthouse. As in place of a Revelation. He's got a little card selection now. Angel of Serenity.
To cast a Angel of Serenity here. Snapcaster Mage at the ready.
He's actually so far ahead that it's possible that he just uses his Restoration Angels. Since James doesn't have a Cavern and Smiters aren't that threatening to him right now, he can use his Snapcaster or his Restoration Angels as additional Snapcasters solely to sort of counter slivers type aggro assault.
And now you're going to see Job maybe consider using that Lighthouse in the turn. He does have a card that he's more than happy to discard in Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, when the control deck is so far ahead, they're willing to loot away a Supreme Verdict. You can't feel good as the opponent.
And he does
not too
discard
confident.
that. His hand right now, 2 copies of Restoration Angel, an Angel of Serenity, and Augur of Bolas, and we will see what Job's draw step is for the turn. He finds himself a Rewind.
Wow. Just a fistful of counter magic. Significantly more cards in hand than James, and significantly better cards in hand than James. Jonathan Job, less of a Sphinx's Revelation deck this game, and more of a flash deck, more of old school sort of Vapor Snag-esque deck where you just kind of get some pretty mediocre threats in play, but just sort of counter, 1 for 1 every single turn and close the gap of life totals.
There's a Smiter.
Big ol' elephant, one of the few things that can't be countered by Jonathan Job, but Restoration Angel a significant threat here with James only at 10 life, an augur for value.
You kind of see the difference between, how you and I play Magic, where, I kind of sense weakness and I just want to kind of pounce with
Yeah.
Restoration Angels and try to get my opponent dead and try to cut their draws. Where, I mean, you can try to close the game quickly, but at the same time, by playing a little bit more conservatively, as like you are kind of advocating, and you see what Jonathan's doing, he's kind of getting it so that he has created himself a sense of inevitability.
Yeah, rather than win 95% of the time in the next 4 turns, he's winning 99% of the time, but it's going to take him 8 to 10 turns.
See, I'm busy. I got things to do.
Yeah.
I want to get him dead quick, and then just play my next match. You're going to see Smiter come across here. Jonathan, again, can use his life total as a resource here. He is at 12. He fans through his graveyard. He does have, a Restoration Angel to blink that Snapcaster Mage to Azorius, charm that Smiter back to the top. He can also just block with an Augur of Bolas and move on with his life as well, which you see him do. Detention Sphere is going to join the party here.
Detention Sphere, again, pretty low impact, pretty, you look at Jonathan Job's deck, the only really, truly profitable card that you can D-Sphere is, there's the hand. I was going to say Some of the Legion, but...
Can't D-Sphere the hand.
Yeah.
Can't Detention Sphere that one. So Jonathan Job, Star City Games Invitational Top 8er, and Star City Games Legacy Open Champion in Las Vegas last year. He's going on to the finals, and he's playing against another Legacy Open